She is already saying goodbye to herself when the human kneels down beside her and asks if she takes sugar in her coffee. The field hospital on Verath Station smells like antiseptic and burnt circuitry, and the particular chemical tang that Kael-Sorvath has come to associate with dying, not her own dying, not yet, but the dying of the air itself, the slow collapse of a place that has been holding its breath for too long. The war between the Sorvath hegemony and the Drev coalition has been over for 11 months. The ceasefire agreement was signed on pale paper with pale ink by pale diplomats who flew home the same evening. The wounded, however, were not given the same option. They remain. Kael-Sorvath is one of 43 Sorvath soldiers still housed in the Verath medical wing. She is, by the assessment of the 3 Drev physicians who reviewed her case last week, the least likely of the 43 to leave under her own power. The shrapnel from the defense grid at Corridor 7 caught her along the left side of her torso, her secondary breathing membrane and the base of her crest, the tall ridge of cartilage and nerve endings that Sorvath used to express what their faces, by human standards, are not built to show. Her crest hangs crooked now, half-collapsed, nerve-dead on the right side. Among her people, a broken crest is not merely a wound. It is a declaration. It tells every Sorvath who looks at her that she has been unmade. She has not asked for visitors. She has not asked for much of anything. The Drev nurses bring her food twice a day and she eats it without complaint, which they seem to interpret as gratitude. It is not gratitude. It is simply that she no longer has a strong opinion about continuing. The Sorvath word for this state is vel-harath. There is no human equivalent. The closest translation is something like the willing release of claim on the future, but that doesn't capture the full weight of it, the way it feels from the inside, like setting down a very heavy stone you have been carrying for so long that your hands have forgotten the shape of anything else. Vel-harath is not weakness. Among the Sorvath, it is considered a form of dignity. When the body has been broken past a certain point, when the social self has been shattered alongside it, choosing vel-harath is understood as grace. The physicians know. They have noted it in her file with the Sorvath medical notation that translates roughly as patient has entered terminal acceptance. Nobody has argued with her about it. That is the proper response. Which is why when the human sits down on the floor beside her bed, actually on the floor, his back against the wall, long legs stretched out in front of him, and asks about the coffee, Kael-Sorvath does not know what to do with her face. He is not a physician. He is, as best she can determine in the first confused moment of his appearance, a maintenance worker. He has the pale tan coveralls of the station's civilian repair staff, and his boots have a specific kind of worn-in scuffing at the left toe that suggests he favors that foot when climbing ladders. He is carrying a thermos that smells of dark roasted something and a small paper bag that is already translucent with grease. He is, by every observable measure, a completely ordinary middle-aged human male, with a beard that is losing its argument with gray, and eyes the color of old timber. Sugar, he says again, patient as stone, holding up the thermos in a way that is not quite an offering and not quite a question. In your coffee if you drink it, some people don't. I usually take it without, but I brought some packets anyway in case. I am not familiar, Kael-Sorvath says carefully, with the custom you are enacting. He considers this. I'm just having breakfast, he says. Figured I'd have it here today instead of the break room. Break room smells like Drev engineer and day-old noodles. He opens the paper bag. Inside are 2 items that appear to be bread-based, slightly flattened, dark on one side. He holds one out toward her. She stares at it. Egg sandwich, he says. Well, egg adjacent. They don't have actual chicken eggs on Verath, so it's made with something the commissary calls a protein round, which is exactly as depressing as it sounds. But it's hot and it doesn't taste bad if you don't think too hard about it. His name, she learns over the next few minutes, is Denny Marsh. He is a structural repair technician, one of the small civilian crew contracted to maintain Verath Station's aging framework while the military presence winds down. He has been on the station for 8 months. Before that, he was a construction foreman in a place called Tacoma, which is on the western coast of North America, which is on a planet called Earth. He has a daughter named Rosie who just started secondary school and is apparently very good at mathematics and very bad at answering her messages, which he says with the particular tone of a person who finds the thing annoying and charming in roughly equal measure. Kael-Sorvath does not ask for any of this information. He simply provides it in the easy, unpressured way of a person narrating his own life to the empty air, requiring nothing in return. She eats half the egg-adjacent sandwich. She does not mean to. It simply becomes what her hands are doing while he talks. He comes back the next morning with the thermos and the paper bag. He sits on the floor again. He does not ask how she is feeling, which she notes with something close to relief. The Drev nurses ask how she is feeling twice a day. She always tells them the same thing, which is that she is adequately maintained, and they always respond with a kind of professional cheer that she finds exhausting in a way she cannot fully articulate. Denny does not ask. He talks about the panel seal he had to replace on level 4, the one that had been incorrectly installed sometime in the last decade and had been slowly warping ever since. He talks about the argument he is apparently having with himself about whether to message Rosie about the math competition she mentioned 3 weeks ago and never followed up on, or whether following up makes him the sort of parent who hovers, which he says Rosie's mother always accused him of being, which he is not sure is fair but is also not sure is unfair. He asks Kael-Sorvath what she thinks. She is startled enough to answer. "You should message her," she says. A crest half raised in inquiry is not the same as a crest raised in dominance. He looks at her. That's a Sorvath expression. An approximation. The meaning is that asking is not the same as demanding. The difference is what you do with the answer. He nods slowly. He takes a sip of coffee. Okay, yeah, that's actually pretty good. He messages Rosie that evening. He tells Kael-Sorvath the next morning that Rosie sent back a voice message 7 minutes later, which is apparently a record, and that the math competition is regional and Rosie thinks she might place in the top 5 and she is nervous about it and wanted to tell someone and had been waiting for an excuse. He says this last part quietly, looking at the thermos rather than at Kael-Sorvath, and the small weight of it hangs in the air between them for a moment. "You gave her the excuse," Kael-Sorvath says. "Yeah," he says, "guess I did." On the 4th morning, he arrives to find 2 Drev physicians standing at the foot of her bed in the quiet, conclusive way of people delivering information that has already been decided. The elder physician, Dr. Voshan, is speaking in the formal register that Kael-Sorvath has come to recognize as the vocabulary of institutional finality. "The treatment protocols for your condition," Dr. Voshan is saying, "require resources that Verath Station's current allocation cannot support. The Sorvath hegemony has been contacted regarding transfer, but the response has indicated that given the current political restructuring following the ceasefire non-critical cases, and here a brief pause that is not quite an apology, are not being prioritized for repatriation at this time." What this means, Kael-Sorvath understands perfectly well, is that the hegemony has reviewed her file, noted the Vel Herath notation, and elected not to spend resources on a soldier who has already made her peace with the outcome. It is, in a grim way, efficient. She does not blame them. It is the logical response. As such, Dr. Voshan continues, "We will be transitioning your care to a comfort-focused protocol. Your current accommodations will remain unchanged." He means she will remain here until she does not remain anywhere. He means this with genuine clinical compassion. She knows this. She accepts it. "Thank you," she says, which is all that is required. Dr. Voshan nods, makes a notation on his tablet, and he and his colleague leave with the quiet efficiency of people who have other patients and other hard conversations waiting. Denny is standing in the doorway. He has been there, she realizes, since before the physicians arrived. He heard all of it. He has the paper bag in one hand and the thermos in the other, and he is very still in a way that does not look like stillness. It looks like a man deciding something. He comes in, he sits down on the floor, he opens the paper bag, he does not say anything for a while. They eat together in silence, which has become, in only 4 mornings, its own kind of language. Then he says, "What's the thing, the word you used yesterday about the stone?" She had not realized she had spoken it aloud. "Vel Hareth," she says. What does it actually mean, all of it? She considers how to explain it to him, this human with his thermos and his worried thoughts about his daughter and his worn boot. She considers that he deserves a real answer rather than the simplified one she has given the Drev nurses. "Among my people," she says, Air is a belief that the self is not one thing. It is a series of claims, claims on the future, on role, on standing. The crest, she does not touch it, but her eyes move toward the broken, hanging side, is not decorative. It is broadcast. It tells others who I am in relation to them, what I am claiming, what I am offering. A broken crest cannot broadcast. A Sorvath without broadcast is, she stops. The stone I described was perhaps not accurate. It is less about putting something down than about discovering that you have been defined for your entire existence by a thing you can no longer be, and deciding that releasing the claim is less painful than attempting to hold it. Denny is quiet for a moment, then he says, "You've decided to die." "I have decided not to resist." "Those aren't the same thing." She looks at him. It is the first time she has looked at him directly, crest level, the way Sorvath look at something they are taking the measure of. "No," she says slowly, "I think I have been imprecise." He takes a long pull from his thermos. He wipes his mouth with the back of his hand. He says, "Okay, so here's the thing, I'm not a doctor, I'm a structural repair tech. I fix things that are broken in ways that the original builders didn't intend. And I have absolutely no business getting involved in a medical decision made by." He waves vaguely at the door where the physicians exited, people with actual degrees. Well, he stops as she waits. "But," he says, "I've also been sitting on this floor for 4 mornings now, and you're the most interesting person I've talked to since I got to this station. And I think you just told me you've decided the building is too damaged to bother with, and I would like, with respect, to disagree with that assessment." Kael-Sorvath stares at him. She has been assessed by physicians, by military commanders, by the quiet bureaucratic machinery of 2 governments. She has not been disagreed with, not about this. "On what basis," she says slowly, "does a structural repair technician disagree with a comfort protocol?" "On the basis," he says, "that I want to see what you're like when you're not in a hospital bed. And that seems like a good enough reason to me." It is not a good reason. It is, by any measurable standard, an absurd reason. It is the kind of reason a person gives when they do not have a logical argument and have decided logic is not the point. She does not know what to do with it. "The physicians," she says carefully, "have indicated that the resources required." "Yeah," he says, "I heard that part. Can I ask you something? The thing with the crest, the broken one. Is that fixable? Like, is it a bone thing, a nerve thing? What are we actually talking about?" She explains it to him, more fully than she has explained it to anyone, because he asks follow-up questions and sits with the answers instead of writing them in a tablet and moving on. The crest is cartilage and a network of specialized nerve clusters. The right side has suffered what the Sorvath call Veth collapse, a loss of signal between the nerve clusters and the membrane that controls expression. It is not dissimilar in mechanical terms to the loss of motor signal in a human limb. There are treatments, they are expensive. They require a specialist, a Sorvath neural technician specifically, because the crest structure is not something Drev or human medicine has much occasion to learn. There is one such specialist, so far as Kael-Sorvath knows, operating within 10 standard travel units of Verath Station. She has no money. She has no standing in the political sense to request a transfer. She has a government that has decided she is not worth the logistics. Denny listens to all of this. He is quiet for a long moment, then he says, "Okay, I'm going to need to make some calls." Well, Yuka nods. Probably not, he agrees, but I'm going to make them anyway. He is gone for most of the day. When he comes back in the early evening, he is carrying his thermos and a second one, which he sets on the edge of her bed with the careful deliberateness of a man who has made a decision and is slightly embarrassed by the size of it. So, he says, sitting down on the floor with the weariness of someone who has made a lot of calls. The specialist, Dr. Marinsol, operates out of a practice on the OX7 transit hub, which is 4 hours from here by the commercial shuttle. I talked to her office. The procedure you need, it's possible. It's not cheap. It's about 11,000 credits. Kael-Sorvath is silent. Which, Denny continues, is roughly what I make in 4 months, after taxes. Well, the silence extends. I know that's a lot, he says. He is looking at the thermos he set on her bed rather than at her. I'm not going to pretend it isn't. I've got Rosie's school to think about, and I'm renting back home, and this isn't, he exhales slowly, this isn't a small thing. Denny, she says, his name is strange in her mouth. She has not said it before. Why would you do this? He is quiet for what feels like a very long time. The station hums around them, the low baseline vibration of a place that keeps going regardless of what happens inside it. My dad was sick, he says finally. About 12 years ago, heart thing complicated. He was in the hospital for 3 months, and there was a week, I remember this really clearly, where everyone around him sort of started talking about him like he was already gone. Not unkindly, the doctors weren't unkind. But there was this shift where his future stopped being a thing anyone expected to happen. And he noticed, he could tell. And I watched him start to let go of it, and I remember thinking, someone needs to be the person who expects him to get better. Someone needs to keep expecting it, even when it's stupid to. Because if nobody expects it, then it definitely doesn't happen. He picks up the thermos he brought for her and turns it in his hands. He lived another 9 years. He got to meet Rosie. He taught her card tricks. He was the worst card cheat I've ever seen, and she loved him completely. Well, he sets the thermos down. I'm not saying I can fix everything, he says. I'm just saying I'm not ready to stop expecting. The thing that happens in Kael-Sorvath's chest is not something the Sorvath have a word for. There are words for gratitude, for obligation, for the particular warmth of recognition between crest equals, for the bond between soldiers who have survived the same fire. There is no word for what happens when a human stranger on an alien station holding a thermos refuses to agree with your decision to stop existing. She does not have a word for it. She thinks, sitting there with the half of her crest that still works raised in the closest approximation she can manage to something like wonder, that perhaps it belongs to a vocabulary she has only just begun to learn. She says, I cannot allow you to spend 4 months' earnings on my care. You don't have a lot of say in it, he says pleasantly. I already contacted Dr. Marinsol's office to ask about the payment plan. Well, there is a payment plans. There is now. I had to explain the situation. Her admin, Vesh 3-something, was very helpful once I explained that the patient was a war veteran who had been basically forgotten by her government. I think the phrase, bureaucratically abandoned, may have resonated. Kael-Sorvath looks at him for a long moment. You are a very stubborn creature. The structural repair, he says. You have to be, the building doesn't care about your feelings, you just keep at it. The next 3 weeks are not simple. Denny, it turns out, is not a person of influence on Verath Station. He is a civilian contractor with a mid-level access badge and no political standing whatsoever. Getting Kael-Sorvath's care reclassified from comfort protocol to active treatment requires navigating 3 separate bureaucratic offices. A formal objection to the Drev Medical Authority's decision filed on forms that Denny has to obtain from a secondary records office on a different level of the station, and 2 extremely uncomfortable conversations with Dr. Voshan, who is not obstructionist, but is clearly operating under the assumption that the patient herself has no particular preference about the outcome. Denny brings Kael-Sorvath into the second conversation. He positions her chair beside the desk in Voss Hand's office and says, with the pleasant inflexibility of a man who fixes things for a living, "I'd like Dr. Kael-Sorvath to be part of this discussion, since it's her care we're discussing." Voss Hand looks at Kael-Sorvath with the slightly recalibrated attention of a person realizing he has been operating with an incomplete picture. "Of course," he says. "Kael-Sorvath," Denny says, "is there anything you'd like to say about your treatment options?" She has thought about this. She has spent 3 nights thinking about it, in the specific, precise way she used to think through tactical problems before the war changed the shape of thinking into something she could not use anymore. She says, "I would like to pursue active treatment. I withdraw the Vel-Herath notation from my file. I am available to discuss the specifics of a referral to Dr. Marinsal at OX7. Dr. Voss Hand looks at her for a moment longer than strictly necessary. Then he says quietly, "I will update your file immediately." The approval for the transfer takes 11 days. During those 11 days, Denny continues to come every morning with his thermos and the paper bag. The contents of the bag vary. He has apparently begun experimenting with the commissary's available ingredients in a way that suggests he has more ambition than skill in the kitchen, but is improving. The protein round situation becomes, over the course of a week, genuinely respectable once he figures out that the key is high heat and a small amount of something acidic. He tells her more about Rosie. Rosie placed third in the regional math competition. She was devastated about not placing first. Denny told her that third out of several hundred was remarkable. Rosie said that's what people say when first is too far away. Denny said that's not true. He told her about a job he was called in to assess once. A bridge in a small coastal town that everyone said was too far gone, that the engineers had written off. And that turned out, once you actually got in and looked at it, to have a sound central structure that just needed the surface work redone. He said sometimes the difference between first and possible is just someone willing to look at the bones. He says he is not sure Rosie fully bought it, but she laughed, which is at least partial credit. Kael-Sorvath finds herself thinking about Rosie in the quiet parts of the night. The girl she has never met, who is good at mathematics and bad at answering messages and placed third and felt the loss of first so acutely. She thinks about what it means to be seen by a parent who notices, even when you have not made it easy to notice. She thinks this is something she does not have a clean word for either, a warmth at a remove. Care for a person you have never encountered. She files it next to the other wordless things. Dr. Marinsal is a tall Sorvath with a very straight crest and the composed, assessing manner of a person who has spent decades looking at things other people have written off. She examines Kael-Sorvath for an hour and a half at OX7 in a room that smells of clean equipment and competence. She does not use the word Vel-Herath. She uses the word Vel-Shoren instead, which translates approximately as that which awaits restoration. The nerve cluster damage, she says, in the formal medical Sorvath that Kael-Sorvath has not heard spoken properly in almost a year, is consistent with high-velocity impact shrapnel. The primary clusters in the right anterior membrane are severed but not destroyed. The pathway is interrupted, not absent. She pauses. This is operable. The word lands differently than Kael-Sorvath expected. She had been told it was possible. Hearing it confirmed in the precise, unambiguous language of an expert is something else. She looks across the room at Denny, who is sitting in the small waiting area outside the examination space, visible through the glass panel, reading something on his tablet with his feet flat on the floor and his coffee thermos beside him like a familiar. He has come with her. Of course he has. The human, Dr. Marinsal says, following her gaze with the mildly curious attention of someone encountering something they have not previously classified. He is your Kethvar. Kethvar is the Sorvath term for the person who witnesses, the one who stands at the threshold and refuses to look away. It is an old word, older than the hegemony, from a time before the Sorvath had written language and kept their important things in the form of who stood beside whom when the hard moment came. Kael-Sorvath considers the question for a moment. He brought me breakfast, she says, for several weeks. Dr. Marinsol's crest rises fractionally in the expression that corresponds to amused recognition. Yes, she says, that is generally how it starts. The surgery takes 4 hours. Kael-Sorvath wakes in a recovery room with a strange, fizzing sensation along the right side of her crest, like a signal trying to remember the channel. Denny is in the chair beside the bed. He has the thermos. He is asleep with it in his hands and his head tilted back at the specific uncomfortable angle of a person who fell asleep fighting it. She watches him sleep for a while. She does a small, careful thing. She raises the right side of her crest for the first time in almost a year, just slightly, just a fraction. It hurts. It is the particular hurt of something waking up. The signal is there, rough and imprecise and real. She broadcasts for the first time in almost a year something like, "I am here." Denny wakes up a few minutes later with the startled inhale of someone returning from somewhere far away. He looks at her immediately, and she notes that this is the reflex of a person who has been watching for a long time, the immediate orientation toward the thing being worried about. "Hey," he says, his voice is rough with sleep. "Hey," she says, it is a human word. It has no direct Sorvath equivalent, but she has spent enough mornings hearing it used to understand what it carries. It carries, "I see you, I am here, we are still in this moment together." His eyes go to her crest. She watches him see it, the right side raised slightly, not the full broadcast she will eventually manage, but real. Present. His face does something complicated and quiet that she cannot fully decode yet, but she is beginning to learn the vocabulary. "Does it hurt?" he asks. "Oh yes," she says. "Good," he says, and then immediately, "No, I meet. And not that it hurts, I mean that means it's working." "I know what you meant." He sits back in the chair, he opens the thermos. He offers it toward her, she takes it. The coffee is cold. It has been cold since he fell asleep with it in his hands. She drinks it anyway. It tastes like something that has been kept carefully for a long time by someone who expected it to still be needed. 2 weeks later, Kael-Sorvath's crest can hold a full broadcast for approximately 4 minutes before the nerves require rest. Dr. Marinsol says this is excellent progress. The pathways are relearning the signal. By 3 months, she says, the broadcast will likely be full and sustained. By 6 months, the damage should be functionally imperceptible. The Sorvath hegemony's political restructuring produces, in the 48th week after the ceasefire, a formal repatriation process for non-critical cases. The bureaucracy, having forgotten her, now remembers. There is paperwork, there are forms. Denny helps her fill them out, not because she needs help. She is a senior soldier who has navigated military bureaucracy in 3 languages. But because he has become the kind of person who does this alongside her, which is different from doing it for her, and she has come to understand the difference as important. On the morning before her transfer ship is scheduled to depart, they have breakfast in the medical wing for the last time. He brings the thermos and the paper bag. He has improved over the past months to the point where the protein rounds are actually good, something she would not have predicted. He has also, without discussing it, stopped putting sugar in hers because she has told him twice she does not take it, and he remembered. "And so," he says. "And so," she agrees. He is quiet for a moment. He is looking at the thermos in a way she has come to recognize as his thinking face, the slight inward look of a person sorting through possible sentences and discarding most of them. "Rosie placed first in the district finals," he says. "Oh, you did not tell me." "Just found out this morning. She sent me a voice message, 6 minutes long." He says this with the particular quality of voice she has learned to identify as the outward limit of what he will allow himself to feel in public. She talked the whole time, just all of it, Everything she was nervous about and everything that went right and the question she wasn't sure about and how she figured it out. He pauses. She asked about you. Kael-Sorvath's crest rises. She does not stop it. She knows about me. I may have mentioned the person I've been having breakfast with for the past few months. I told her you're a soldier. I told her you're recovering. She asked if you were going to be okay. He looks up. I told her yes. Something moves through Kael-Sorvath that she has no word for in either language, the warmth at a remove. The care for a person never met, arriving back from the other direction. A girl who placed first in a mathematics competition asked about her. A girl who learned to tell her father the things she was nervous about asked about her. Tell her, Kael-Sorvath says slowly, that a broken crest is not the same as no crest. Denny looks at her. It is something I have been thinking about how to say, she says, for someone who placed third and felt it as failure. He nods. He is quiet for a moment, then he says she'll like that. They finish breakfast. The station continues its low, steady hum around them. Through the narrow window at the far end of the ward, the stars are the same stars they have always been, indifferent and permanent and very far away. When she stands to go, she raises her crest, both sides, the recovered right and the unbroken left, to the full broadcast position. It is a formal gesture. Among the Sorvath, it is the broadcast of a warrior to their Kethvar. I saw you. I have been witnessed by you. What you witnessed was real. This is her last act before she leaves the station, and she does it facing him in the way the gesture has always been meant. Denny is not Sorvath. He cannot read the broadcast the way another Sorvath would. He does not know precisely what she is saying. But he straightens slightly, as if he feels the weight of it anyway, the way you feel the gravity of a formal thing, even when you do not know all the words. Safe travels, he says. Eat breakfast properly, she says, not from the paper bag every day. He laughs. It is a short sound, surprised out of him. I'll try. She picks up the small case that contains everything she has accumulated on Verath Station. Medical records, forms for the repatriation office, 2 changes of clothes, and a cold thermos that he pressed into her hands at the last moment, saying she might want something for the journey. It is his thermos, the one he has carried every morning for months. She had started to say she couldn't take it, and he had looked at her with the calm patience of a M. And who has already decided, and she had taken it. She walks down the corridor toward the transfer bay. She does not look back. That is not because she does not want to. It is because the Sorvath understanding of departure, the proper one, the old one, holds that a clean leave-taking is its own form of promise. That when you go without looking back, you are saying, I will be present in the place I am going. My attention will be there. The goodbye is already complete. When her ship lifts from Verath Station, she is sitting in the small passenger compartment looking at the thermos in her hands. It is dented slightly at the base, the chrome worn away in a stripe where a hand has gripped it the same way for years. It smells of dark roasted coffee and someone else's daily life. She does not have a word in Sorvath for what this is. She thinks that is probably all right. Some things belong to a vocabulary that is still being built. 3 months later, from a Sorvath Naval Communications terminal, she sends a message. It is not long, she says. The right side is at 90%, she says. The physicians are no longer surprised by my progress, which I suspect means they are surprised but prefer not to show it. She says, I have been attempting the thing you do with the high heat and the acidic component. The results are so far imprecise. She says, tell Rosie that a broken crest is not a diminished one. She says, the stone is gone. He writes back in less than an hour, which is not the response time of someone who carefully considers before replying. It is the response time of someone who has been paying attention. He says the protein round method works better if you use something citrus adjacent at the very end, not the beginning. He says, Rosie read your message and did not respond out loud, but her mother says she read it 3 times. He says, the panel seal on level 4 held through the seasonal pressure shift, which means he did the repair correctly the first time, which is more satisfying than it probably should be. He says, the break room still smells like Drev Engineer. He says, I expect you to get all the way to 100. Kael-Sorvath reads the last line twice. She does not have a word in Sorvath or in any other language she speaks for the specific feeling of being expected to be well by someone who has decided to keep expecting it. She does not need one. She knows what it is. She knows it in the particular way you know a thing that has already changed you from the inside out, that lives not in vocabulary, but in the place where you used to carry a very heavy stone. She closes the message. She picks up the dented thermos from the corner of her desk where she has set it every morning next to the window. She holds it for a moment, the way you hold something that belongs to a vocabulary you are still learning. Outside the window, the stars are the same stars they have always been. She is looking at them with both sides of her crest raised. Thank you for being here for this story. If something in it stayed with you, a breakfast in a hospital room, a girl who placed third, a man who refused to agree with a goodbye, then you know what this channel is about. We tell the stories that live in the small spaces, the thermos, the word without translation, the decision to keep expecting. If you'd like to hear more, we're here every week. Subscribe if you haven't yet and leave a comment below about the moment that hit you hardest. Your voice is part of what keeps this going. Until next time, take care of each other.